we on? Yep. You're on? Okay. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Force Society monthly teleconference, the In the Know Education Series. My name is Julie Collette, and I'm the Vancouver Support and Resource Coordinator at BC Children's here, and that's where we're broadcasting from in Vancouver. We have 17 different sites and at-home viewer locations. I'd just like to read them out. We have Burnaby tonight, Burns Lake, Chilliwack, Colwood, Kamloops, Langley, Penticton, Port Moody, Prince George, Salmon Arm, Sicamous, Squamish, Surrey, Tri-Cities, Vancouver, Vernon, and Victoria. And that's pretty good considering it's warm and sunny and there's a Canuck game on. So that's great. I'd like to remind everybody to please fill in the feedback forms after you leave your community viewing sites, or the online viewers can go directly to the presentations link button at the top left of your screen. It looks like a little paper clip. We'd like to thank everyone for tuning in for our first season. This is our final session of our first season of In the Know. And this summer we're taking a bit of a break in July and August, but there will be postings on the website in the summer for the In the Know lineup for the whole of next year. So stay tuned for that. Questions. If you want to ask a question to the speaker, you can click on the cartoon speech bubble at the top of the page and type your question, and we will try and answer as many questions as possible. But we do sign off precisely at 8 p.m. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Rob Lees, and he is going to be speaking about building healthy relationships. Rob is a registered psychologist who works with the Ministry of Children and Families with roles in Chilliwack, Child and Youth Mental Health, and the Fraser Region. The Fraser Region Quality Assurance Office. Rob also teaches at the University of Fraser Valley and marriage and family therapy in the graduate program in counseling psychology at the Trinity Western University. Rob has been leading a couple of courses since 1980, and in 1997 he helped form the Building Healthy Relationships, an organization to promote and lead courses for couples. Rob is also an author of the Growth in Marriage Handbook and Prepared Companions. He's married, and he has a wife, obviously, and 2 children and 2 grandchildren. So I'd like to introduce Rob. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Good. Thanks, Julie. Shall I just begin then?
Yes.
Okay. So, as Julie said, my name is Rob Lees, and I work for the Ministry for Children and Family Development. And for 14 years, I've been part of a group of organizations in Chilliwack that offers courses for couples. This is in partnership with our local university of the Fraser Valley. I also teach marriage and family therapy, as Julie mentioned, and we have a partnership with Trinity Western whereby we have master's students helping us coaching couples in their relationships. Today I'd like to share some of the material we use in our couples courses through the organization called the BHR, Building Healthy Relationships. What's unique about the BHR is the partnerships that it represents. It includes 2 universities, the ministry that I work for, some local churches and agencies. And the lead agency happens to be one focused on domestic violence against women and Davis Society. I applaud the society for being involved in primary prevention, as well as their traditional role of picking up the pieces when relationships go terribly wrong. So why bother spending time thinking about couple relationships, especially for parents who have kids with mental health challenges and so many other demands on your time? The main reason is the strong evidence linking parental relationship quality and the adjustment of children. Now let's not get off on the wrong foot here, okay? This isn't blaming parents for child adjustment problems, because we all know people who have either grown up in adverse environments who emerge resilient, and we all know people who are extraordinary parents and still have kids with significant challenges. We can't, however, dodge the fact that how our parents loved each other or didn't will affect how we feel about ourselves. Let me briefly tell you the story of Father Calvo, the author and founder of Worldwide Marriage Encounter. Father Calvo was a Spanish priest who decided he wanted to work with kids from rough neighborhoods and kids that were having trouble. So he started working with kids, and then he deduced that if he really wanted to help kids, he needed to help their families. So he started to work with families. And then as he worked with families, he came to the conclusion, if he's really going to change families, he has to do something about the core of the family, which is the parents and their relationship. So he began to focus on what he considered to be the people that were really doing well in those relationships. And he discovered that they had a deep dialogue. And he tried to create a method for parents to find that deep dialogue. His point was, it's difficult to improve the family without improving the parental dyad or parenting system. So what can help? There's many things that can help us to cope. Our focus here is on improving relationships. There's been much written regarding marriage counseling, but we're fortunate to have some of the best science recently developed available to us. I'm going to focus on two of these resources, the Relationship House model of Dr. John Gottman and Emotionally Focused model of Dr. Susan Johnson and her book, Hold Me Tight, Conversations for Connection. Let's start with Dr. Gottman. What is of note is that he says that he's not a marriage therapist, but a marriage researcher. He's known for his work at the Love Lab at the University of Washington in Seattle. At the Love Lab, couples are closely observed. For instance, they're videotaped having conversations about one of their areas of conflict. During the taping, their biological indicators are monitored. For instance, their heart rate, their galvanic skin response. There's even a sensor that they put on the chairs to capture the wiggles and jiggles. Gottman claims that from a 15-minute video clip of a couple discussing a conflict, his team can predict with 95% accuracy which couples will divorce. So, what do these researchers look for that might predict divorce? There's a whole set of behaviors. We'll look at some of the key do's and don'ts. First, couples that do well tend to begin their conversations softer. They don't begin with demands, you statements, blame, criticism, or strong emotion. They begin soft, calm. Not surprisingly, the researchers found that how conversations begin predicts how they'll end. Here's an example of a hard startup. Why can't I ever get any help around here? Notice this begins with a blaming complaint. Compare this statement where the speaker owns their own experiences, use an I message, and talks about rather than demonstrates their feelings. You'll notice that it also gives the other party an option of when they can participate. I'm feeling frustrated and I need to talk about something. Would now be okay? Notice the difference in tone? The concept of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is taken from a biblical reference to signs that the end of time are coming. These four horsemen announce the coming of the end of a relationship. If these four signs are present, they're the signs that the relationship is really in trouble. So here they are in order. Defensiveness is fairly easy to understand, as is criticism. The former suggests that I can do no wrong, and the latter that there's something wrong with you and how you do things. Stonewalling and contempt deserve more explanation. Stonewalling is classic avoidance behavior. Refusing to talk or participating minimally are stonewalling behaviors. Contempt is more active, and it's seen in dismissive, derogatory comments and in the rolling of the eyes tell. Often people graduate from defensiveness to stonewalling, from criticism to contempt. It only makes sense that the real connection is likely gone if one partner is stonewalling and the other one has contempt for them. Remember the physiological data that Dr. Gottman was collecting on couples? The wiggle chair and the galvanic skin response? At the Love Lab, they found that in most cases when men get angry and upset, the physiological effects last longer than they do for women. More often than not, women are better at getting angry and then letting go of their anger. Therefore, when men are angrily aroused, the unpleasant effects last longer. Consequently, men seek to avoid verbal conflict to avoid the negative effects of angry arousal. I just don't want to talk about it. So, women, the men aren't avoiding you, they're avoiding being upset. Obviously, men are just too sensitive. Okay, so I meant that to be a joke. But there's some truth in it. Women are just better in conflict. They're also better in any verbal sparring or communication. If hard startups and the four horsemen, defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, and contempt, are slipping into your relationship, all is not lost. These are clear signs of danger and simply mean you need to do something to preserve the relationship. I now want to discuss a few concepts that might help. Gottman provides another useful concept called bids. In any intimate relationship, we all make bids to be noticed and to have our needs met. Sometimes the bids we make are tentative because we fear being rejected. Sometimes bids are masked, too subtle, clumsy, or made as demands. However the bid happens to be packaged, they always say the same thing. Will you notice me? Do I matter? The concept of bids is useful if you think about how you attempt to get your needs met from your partner, and vice versa. Men are famous for using sex as a bid for connection. Often feeling second to their more verbally capable spouse, they find that being physical is a powerful way to feel connected and valued. Let me now turn your focus to Susan Johnson and her work on emotionally focused couple therapy. This is really homegrown science since Dr. Johnson completed her initial study in this area through her doctoral dissertation here at UBC. Now she teaches at the University of Ottawa. Johnson spent 25 years collecting evidence for her treatment methods and recently packaged her ideas in a popular book called Hold Me Tight, Conversations for Connection. Emotionally focused couple therapy boasts that 85% of distressed couples can become non-distressed when treated. That's a really good success rate. For those of you who have studied psychology, Johnson has taken three well-known theories and blended them together. The theories are Gestalt, with its emphasis on immediate experience and deeper emotions, hence the title Emotionally Focused Therapy. Family systems theory, with its emphasis on patterns and reciprocal causation. And attachment theory. I suspect that many of you know of attachment theory because psychologists have long been interested in the attachment relationship between infants and their early caregivers. Johnson says that every relationship is like a dance. There can be different music but the same patterns, different content but the same roles. She recommends that couples find out their own name for their dance, but describes some common dances to give a head start, such as the protest polka, the freeze and flee minuet, or find the bad guy salsa. Understanding the dance is to understand how systems take on a life of their own and sweep us along, unless we're highly aware of them and we take action to change them. Couples can learn that their desire to meet their needs is swept up in a pattern that locks in both of them, equally captive to the pattern. Couples can learn to outsmart their dance, change their roles, and be more aware of the needs that they are trying to meet through their dance. Johnson would ask a couple the following question: the more I, the more you. The more you, the more I. The more I withdraw, the more you yell. The more you yell, the more I withdraw. the pattern develops a life of its own. A couple recently told me, because they were starting to see the pattern in their relationships, that they were able to look at each other and say, "It's happening again." She would ask him for something, a bid to connect. He would interpret it as critical. He would respond defensive. She would become critical of his defensiveness. He would defend more. They learned that any one of them could interrupt the pattern once they could see that this was part of their dance. Identifying emotions is really important in this theory. Johnson assists couples in finding the soft, vulnerable emotions that lay beneath the surface. A loud and demanding spouse may really be frightened that they're unlovable and will be abandoned if they don't demand to be noticed. The rejection-sensitive spouse may pull away out of fear that if they ask for what they need and what they want, that they'll be told that they're unworthy. Partners usually become allies against the problem when they're able to identify the soft emotions that lay under the surface of the hard emotions. Usually when people are angry, it's a sign that needs are not being met and that they are hurt in some way. We teach couples in the BHR that soft feelings take more courage, but they're more powerful. Often when people are simply able to say, "That hurt," or "I feel sad and discouraged," the other party feels empathy and drawn toward them. In my opinion, one of the most important contributions of Johnson's work has been to help us to understand that what we know about children applies to intimate love relationships as well. We look to our partner to be our safe harbor and our secure base, which is why it's especially alarming when we feel criticized or under attack by someone that we love. Intimate relationships are meant to be safe places to go when we're emotionally hurt, sick, or frightened. Recently, we were having a family party, and my grandson, who's 2.5, bumped his head. He ran through a group of people, past his Nana, whom he loves, past his dad, to throw himself into the arms of my daughter, his mom, at which point he began to wail and cling to her. This is classic attachment behavior. When our attachment place seems unsafe, we need to seek out other ports in the storm. This need for connection isn't a modern invention. It's deeply woven into our biology. When you were small, you had to cry and make other sounds to ensure that the attention of care providers came to you, without which you would have died. You may have seen the movie called Castaway with Tom Hanks, in which he's marooned on a desert island, and he has a ball with him, and he puts a happy face on the ball with his blood, and he talks to it, and he calls it Wilson. And then when he's able to get off the island on a raft, he takes Wilson with him, and in a storm, Wilson is lost from the raft. He dives in, tries to save Wilson, but can't capture the ball again. He gets back on the raft, and he cries unconsolably. Susan Johnson says that when you watch that movie, the editors and producers of the movie don't have to explain to anyone why he's crying the way he is. Johnson gives us an acronym, R. Are you there for me? Are you responsive to me? Will you engage with me? Remember the bids that we talked about? Bids are complex biological and social behavior that are linked to our survival instinct. These hardwired needs, therefore, have a very powerful life and death feel to them, which explains why sometimes we do crazy things in the name of love. Typical extreme patterns are women who sacrifice themselves too much, and men who become aggressive when become aggressive with women that they profess to love. All this because of this deeply ingrained need to matter, to feel important and secure. Take a look at this slide from Winnie the Pooh. Piglet sidled up beside Winnie the Pooh. "Pooh," he whispered. "Yes, Piglet," said Pooh. "Nothing," said Piglet, taking Pooh's paw. "I just wanted to be sure of you." One of the couples I work with told me that he texts and calls several times during their day. He now calls himself Piglet. Johnson often tells couples that their bids and behavior are very much like Piglet. They are saying, "Are you there for me? Where are you?" Johnson reminds us that in criminal law, extended solitary confinement is considered cruel and unusual punishment. Why? Because we need to be connected, no matter who we are. Knowing that we all have the need to be connected and to be sure of someone, you might ask, how do we meet those needs? For some of us, when our needs aren't met, we protest. Some of us withdraw, some of us cling. You might recognize these patterns in the attachment styles of kids. So these behaviors are saying, if you're a protester, they're saying, I want to matter and I don't feel that I do, like the little girl on your screen. Withdrawal is a way of saying, I don't really believe anyone's going to look after me. And clingy needs reassurance and predictability. Consider translating the following statement through an attachment lens. I've heard this many times in couple therapy. I don't love you anymore. What I think this actually means is, I feel hopeless that I'll ever be able to connect with you as I need. Or translate this one, you're selfish. This may mean, when translated through the lens of attachment, I feel like I don't matter to you. If we can't see behind the surface message to the attachment message, we're likely to misunderstand the message. Frequently in marriage therapy, I interpret a message and the other spouse will look at their partner dumbfounded and say, is that what you're really saying? Yes. What we've discussed here have been two scientific works on improving couple relationships. We know that improving parental couple relationships, whether the parents are married, cohabiting, separated, divorced, or never married, won't hurt and will likely be beneficial to the people in their downline. If you're a lone parent, ensuring that you intentionally develop peers that are there for you is equally important. What we've discussed thus far has been the research of Dr. John Gottman and the Love Lab from Seattle, with a focus on the concept of beginning conversations with soft startups, avoiding the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, contempt. Although Gottman has many more key principles, I recommend that you think about bids, how you make them, and how people around you make them to you. One young man who was seeing me for marriage therapy said that after he started thinking about bids, it transformed how he reacted to people at work. He began to see that even in casual workplace connections, people make bids, and when these bids are acknowledged, they come alive. We also discussed the homegrown research of Dr. Susan Johnson and her focus on understanding and taming negative relationship patterns, then paying attention to the need for connection, and where each of us searches in our own way to test whether or not we matter to those we love. Here are some other useful couple resources, such as Divorce Busting by Michelle Weiner-Davis, David Snarch's Passionate Marriage, and Harvell Hendricks' Getting the Love You Want. I've chosen to just focus on Johnson and Gottman because of their strong scientific background, but there are many resources that can point us toward relationship improvement. Don't worry about writing them down right now because I'll show them again at the end. Over the years, we've worked with over 500 couples through the Building Healthy Relationships courses in Chilliwack and Abbotsford, the BHR. We've learned that when couples make their own relationship a priority, and for lone parents when they prioritize themselves and adult support systems, they feel more empowered and able to respond to the demands of parenting. Sometimes parents mistakenly think that a child-focused home is the best environment. Remember, children don't always need to be at the center of the universe. Just to know that the center of their universe is stable, grounded, competent, nurturing, and nurtured. Of course, it goes a long way to providing this type of context if you, the parents, are providing this connection to each other and receiving it from somebody. Well, fine, you might say to me, how do we actually do these things? Let's have some action. What about lone parent households, or those who are married singles now, roommates, not soulmates? You might have to do some soul searching about who and how your core attachment needs can be met. Maybe you've already done this. If you haven't, the message here tonight is it's smart to be planful about how you look after these core needs of yours. If it isn't a spouse, let it be a trusted friend or relative. My colleague who helped me with the PowerPoint put this picture of the donkey in because she said the message should be, don't be a stubborn ass. Listen to some of these tips, and even if your partner or attachment figures aren't currently meeting your needs, start to take action on your own. Here are some things you can do. Let's call it marriage counseling for one. Start with fondness and admiration. Dr. Gottman found that increasing the ratio of positive to negative interactions makes all the difference between an unhappy and a happy spousal system. In fact, really happy couples have just as many negative interactions as unhappy couples. The unhappy couples just don't have the positive. The basis for responding positively is to remember why it is that you were fond of your partner or what you admire about them. What's good about them? What attracted you to them in the first place? Think of them in the most kindly possible light. Even if you think they're a stubborn ass, you can admire their tenacity and their determination. Thinking fondly of your spouse, like your children, will help you respond in softer and gentler ways. We remind couples in our courses that everybody was somebody's baby. Treat your partner like that. Gottman also discusses the idea of love maps. The masters of relationships, in contrast to the disasters, know a lot about each other. They know what their partner's favorite color is, their favorite show, what their most fond childhood memory is, who their most trusted friends are now, and why. Standing apart from your partner, ask yourself if you really know them for who they are now, today. Assume that we all change every day. I met my partner when I was 16 years old and she was 15. I'm now 62. There's a lot of water under that bridge. In that time, we had 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and I was an ordained minister for a period of time, and then I became a psychologist, and she became a school principal, and then she retired. Huge personal changes, transformations. So assume that we all change every day. We aren't who we were yesterday. What's the most exciting part of your partner's day? What was the most discouraging thing that happened to them last week? These small things add up to a love map that can help you demonstrate that you really know your partner. Then there's the all-important basic skill of using I statements instead of you statements. I statements are self-responsible. You statements come across as blaming and criticism, which you'll remember is one of the 4 horsemen. Try this one on for size. Have a conversation with your partner or somebody close, and don't ever use the word you. You'll find it's not easy. I statements are to couple communication what deep breathing is to mental health, and what sneezing into your sleeve and washing your hands is to public health. This skill alone could save a lot of relationships. Here are examples of situations where you can see the difference between an I message and a you message. For example, you see on the extreme left there, the situation is the wife rejected a sexual advance. The message from the partner is, "What's the matter with you?" An I message would be, "I feel hurt and confused." Another situation, husband forgot to call. Wife says, "You're so irresponsible." The I message, "I'm really frustrated. I thought we had a plan." Notice that you can still say what you mean with an I message. In fact, it's likely closer to those primary feelings we discussed and more likely to invite empathy and interest from your partner. You can see where the you message comes across blaming and critical, with those hard startups, the dance is on. Every relationship requires attention, and attention means time. How can you carve out time that announces to your kids and others that your relationship is a priority? How easily we let go of the opportunity to be together. Money and child minding often become stumbling blocks here. It's the mindset that's really crucial, though. Reaching the point where you say that your own relationship is a key relationship among all the family relationships. Here's another thing that can be done. Improve your sex. Why focus on sex? Well, mainly because it's a pretty good bellwether of relationship problems, a barometer of closeness and distance. Also, it's often more important to men, and sadly, more often than not in our society, it's the men that have more difficulty with connection. Johnson reminds that men are acculturated to see sex as a way to seek validation, not only as an outlet for sexual tension, but to feel that they matter and are valued. Well, no mental health slideshow would ever be complete without the obligatory pictures of the brain and discussion of those implications. So here we see a depiction of the brain, and you see on the far left the small listening particle and other parts of the brain. I hope you realize this slide is a joke. But it does help to point out some of the stereotypes commonly held about men. Sometimes these stereotypes become an impediment to men understanding their sexuality and women really missing their strong need for connection. Here's the slide of the female brain. Take a look at that one. You'll see in the footnote of this same joke slide that it says, notice how closely connected the small sex cell is to the listening gland. It's common for both men and women to feel that sex is a more natural response to closeness when achieved through communication, empathy, and understanding. If you have a child with special needs, such as a mental health, behavioral, or emotional challenge, you may often feel drained and not very sexy. That's understandable. Have a frank talk with your partner about what has happened to your sexual connection. Use your I message. Start softly, and remember to watch for the bids of your partner. Johnson discusses 3 types of sex: solace sex, sealed-off sex, and synchronous sex. Solace sex occurs when people get so far apart they need comfort, and then they find each other, then unfortunately return to their remote positions. Sealed-off sex is sex without emotional connection for the release of sexual tension. Synchronous sex, which she encourages, is what Johnson recommends for healthy couples, is sex that's erotic, playful, and emotionally connected. Here's a dilemma I've found robbing committed couples of a lot of their positive connection. A common pattern is for affection to become a prelude to sex. Here's an example. The husband approaches his wife, kisses her on the mouth, but rubs her bum with his hand. Right away she thinks, does he want sex? I don't have time for that right now. If he's making a bid for sex, if she says no, she risks rejecting him. If she responds to his affection, she may end up having sex when she didn't want to. So they learn to avoid affection because of the dilemma that's implied. In the BHR, we teach couples to discuss this dilemma. What often works is for couples to contract for dates where they can create the conditions where they have time to connect, to be in touch, and to feel like they want to be sexual. Men often just need to know when, and to see affection outside of these times as a prelude to when. We encourage the men to never seek sex outside of these dates, but to keep up the affection at all times. Not having to make a decision about sex, women are then freed up to demonstrate the affection that they feel for their partner. Although teenagers may scoff, kids of all ages usually enjoy seeing their parents being affectionate. Somehow it's like the two parts of themselves are joined and at peace. Finally, start building rituals that enhance your attachment system. The slide in front of you shows a number of simple attachment rituals that you can incorporate into a relationship. Simple things such as kissing and hugging goodbye and hello, writing letters and notes to each other, texting each other, participating in religious rituals, reading a book together. One of the best ones that I've found, and this is particularly for spouses who have been abused as children or harmed as children or not well parented, is for the other spouse, if they're healthy enough, to read a book to their spouse. So if you're doing a self-help book together, like the Hold Me Tight book, the spouse that's come from a healthier place would read that at nighttime to their partner. Now you can see the obvious implication is that when you were small, if you were parented well, likely your parents read to you at bedtime. And so there's that sense of built-in nurturing the partner at the same time as sharing information together. Call during the day to check in. Set a time to talk daily. Have a regular date night. Choose a hobby to share. I'm sure you could come up with your own list, but develop rituals and stick with them. So in conclusion, having partners with kids with mental health challenges, or having parents, it should be, with kids with mental health challenges, ensure that they take time to consider ways to improve their adult attachment relationship. So that's the bottom line of what I'm attempting to convey to you tonight and hope that you'll take to heart. We've hoped to provide some information from the work of Dr. John Gottman and Dr. Susan Johnson, along with our insights from the Building Healthy Relationship courses in Chilliwack. The content is not meant to be couple counseling or to take the place of a consultation with a trained marriage and family therapist. If you're aware that your relationship is in distress, consider the services of a qualified marriage therapist as an investment in yourself and in your family. I'd like to give some credits to a few people. Tina Lee, who is a student of mine previously, now a mental health worker in Richmond, BC. Esther Gronhoff and Jay Timms, who are mental health clinicians with me in the Ministry for Children and Family Development. Bob Yosef, a former student of mine. And technical assistance from Lisa Baker, who's also a child and youth mental health clinician in Chilliwack. And as I said earlier on, that I provide you with a few resources. Now, there's just a plethora of resources available, not all of them with good scientific grounding like the two I've talked to you about tonight, but here are 5 that I think I would have confidence in recommending to you. So there's John Gottman with his 7 principles for making marriage work. Gottman's written, he's quite prolific, and you can find his website and find all kinds of YouTubes of him talking as well that can be helpful. But I would suggest to you his book, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. Harvell Hendricks has written a couple of books as well, but his first and the one that got the most attention will put out his theory is Getting the Love You Want. Susan Johnson's popular book, she's written a number of texts and works more for therapists, but her popular book is simply called Hold Me Tight, Conversations for Connection. And I've been recommending to couples, and in my history as a marriage therapist, I've never seen a book that's had such quick impact on couple relationships. David Snarch, The Passionate Marriage, and Michelle Weiner-Davis, Divorce Busting. So I think any one of these people you could go on YouTube as well, and you could check them out and hear a bit more about their theories, and that might help you in your decision about what resources that you would use. So that's the end of the presentation component, and I'm open to any questions or discussion.
One comment from Rob Smith saying, well done. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Are there other questions? Not at the moment?
Technical things earlier, but nothing right now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I can't even think of a question at the moment for you, because just a lot of information to absorb. It's I wish I'd met you a few years ago. Anyway.
Well, something I could say, Julie,
Yeah.
just in response to that, is when we began this webinar, I was saying that I was concerned that people might take this the wrong way, that in some way this was saying that the parents' relationship was responsible for issues they had with their kids. And I just wanted to make sure and underline the point that this is really about how you can do things for you, and the more things you do for you, the better it's going to be for you in parenting your kids. But I know when people are in crisis, like you were saying today, we're sitting at BC Children's Hospital, there's parents with kids on this unit. Their lives are in turmoil because they're revolving around a very sick child. But when people are stable enough, I'd encourage them to really take a look at some of these concepts and about kind of feeding their own soul. Yeah.
We do have a question now. Regarding blended families, a question kind of came in. I am wondering if it helps children in a blended family to see bids of affection between their parents just as much as would be if it were their biological parents.
Okay, well that depends, in my opinion, on just so many things in terms of how the kids feel about this new relationship and the partners. I do think it's a little bit different for them, and I usually encourage people to have different roles than to see themselves as equal partners in the parenting role. So my advice to people in blended families, as for the person who's not the biological parent, to think of themselves more like a good friend with that child. And I would go slow with any open signs of affection with the kids early on. Don't know why I'm talking to you specifically, Julie. I should be looking at the camera, but yeah, I think that's a very hard thing to navigate, and early on I think it would be wise for people to go slow with the public displays of affection with a new partner in a blended family.
Another comment and another question. And try to say this. Thank you, Rob. Wow, thanks, Rob. Really valuable information and a great resource for us all. Much appreciated. And then from Sam Arm, we have a subject on sex. How do parents explain their need for intimacy to their kids with mental health challenges?
Okay. Well, again, that varies very much depending on what the nature of the mental health challenge is. A general rule of thumb that I would suggest is that we've become kind of phobic about sex and committed relationships. And what we've allowed to happen is that kids are trained in our society to think that really good sex happens in uncommitted relationships. And they have very little evidence of seeing their parents as sexual beings if their parents are in a committed relationship. And you'll hear stories of people say things like, oh, on Sunday afternoon, Mom and Dad used to have a nap, right? And those people knew that their parents were having sex. And in some ways, it was good for them. And although we need to have privacy around these types of things, I think that we rob children of seeing that sex can be part of a larger commitment, generally speaking, if parents kind of shroud that and keep that from the children. And in terms of mental health challenges, so much of it would, in my opinion, depend on what the issues are for the child. But certainly for kids with anxiety and depression, which are two of the major mental health challenges for kids, to know that their parents feel connected with each other and can be playful with each other and are affectionate, likely that will spread through the whole family too. So keep appropriate boundaries around sexuality, but don't shroud from your kids the fact that you're sexual beings with each other. Hope that helps.
One more just came in. Follow up on blended families. My stepson is over every Wednesday and every second weekend. I find I feel left out when my stepson is over. I still want time alone with my fiance without his son. Any suggestions?
Without his on those days, eh? Well, the one suggestion is that there's a lot of heavy lifting to do early in blended families. And a lot of that heavy lifting is to win the respect of the kids who aren't your kids. And so that takes a lot of real personal discipline. And so I appreciate what the the questioner is saying, because they're identifying what their need is, if they can bind that need, park it, or find some ways for their partner to give them reassurances, then that might help them through those times. But if the child is only coming over on the Wednesday or just intermittently, they're going to feel that they want time with that their biological parent. They want to feel connected with them, and they don't want to feel that somebody else is interfering, typically. So my best shot right now to that question is to really discipline yourself, and if you can discipline that need for some period of time, make sure your partner knows about it. You might need some extra reassurance other times that over the long haul, those kids will appreciate you, respect you, and you can be much more yourself.
Okay, another question regarding older children. First, thank you. And the question is there hope to better mental health issues with children who have spent 18 to 20 years in a marriage that needs this information?
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting question. Every case is different, of course, so that's the proviso I'll put on this answer. But I think at any stage when kids see their parents doing well, they do better. I have a 91-year-old dad, and I know how he does affects how I do. What's going on in his life, I'm very much tied to it. So an 18-year-old, a 20-year-old, I think they're concerned too. They may not show it, but they're concerned about the well-being of their parents and the well-being of their parents' relationships.
Okay, and next, regarding anxiety in couples. My son has anxiety, and it seems whenever my husband and I try to have a conversation or interact with each other, it comes between us and causes turmoil. How can we overcome this?
That's a challenge, and I guess it would be important to know a few things, like how old the child is and what this behavior is about. The family therapists often thought that this kind of behavior from kids indicates some anxiety they have about the parents being alone together. So rather than seeming like it's separating the parents, that they think it may actually be a symbol of the kids trying to get the attention to them so that the parents don't talk, because if they're left to talk, something might go wrong and it'll fall apart. So that's one interpretation. What you would do about that, I think, is to, over time, insist that you actually have that time. There's an intervention that's called the univariate prescription, where parents are told to go out and say to the kids, we're going out tonight, and they won't tell the kids where they're going. The reason for that prescription is to suggest to the kids in a symbolic way, we have a private life separate from you. And we have a bond, and we keep secrets with each other. So there's that's sort of the sanctity of that relationship. And I think kids need that, but I could see that some kids would be anxious because they would think, gee, if I'm not in the middle, what could go wrong with them?
Okay, we have two more comments. One regarding couples counseling. I think that parents' marital difficulties often have an influence on a child's ability to deal with their mental illness. I just want to say that I think it would be helpful to have counselors who specialize in counseling parents of kids with a mental illness. We're not in the same situation as other couples. I think, too, it's important for the mental health system, mental health teams, for example, or Children's Hospital, to provide couples counseling as part of the picture of healing a child with a mental illness. I find that when my husband and I are getting along, our daughter's symptoms diminish greatly, and they worsen when my husband and I are fighting. I guess it's a chicken and egg situation. Thank you, Rob.
Well, thanks for that comment.
Another comment on typical male versus female behaviors is just wanted to say that at times it is the woman who acts in the stereotypical ways we described males. For example, women using sex to feel connected. Thank you for a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
I have a question, and that would be, obviously, the goal is to keep couples together and keep them married and work on that. At what point is there no point of return, and at what point do you, as a counselor, perhaps suggest that it is best to end the relationship for the sake of the kids or for the sake of everything?
Most counselors are trained to never try to get into that situation of giving people advice that they would follow, but instead to help them come to their own best wisdom. And I've struggled with some couples that I saw as not being a good match, and they were using all the skills, and it was enough to keep them in a relationship that was really grinding on them. More often than not, I see couples, though, who seem far apart, and when they really hear each other, they can connect. So most of the time I see hope, but there have been a few cases when people feel really their differences are so large and their way of perceiving are so different that it's just a real struggle for them to feel like they're close. But in answer to that, I don't think any therapist would really say, this is what I think you should do. Right? People have to come to that on their own because it's such a weighted decision. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add, or any questions that you think people may?
Well, something I would add is that we've looked at this from a multicultural lens too, and when I have had students from immigrant families, particularly South Asian, for example, or Asian families, and they'll say things like, having problems in a marriage would be a shameful thing. So we can't talk about this, we can't seek help for these relationships. But the one thing that they've told me that they can do is education, because education is valued. So I would say this to the audience as well. If you're struggling with something, often a shortcut to get new skills is to go to a course like the ones we have in Chilliwack and Abbotsford called the BHR, because they're not meant to be couple therapy, they're meant to give people tools that they can work with themselves. One of our best referral agents for these courses is the men's counselor at the Ann Davis Services, which is the domestic shelter movement for women in Chilliwack. And the men's therapist there works with a lot of couples, and he makes it a prerequisite that they go to the courses before they come for couple therapy. Because if they've been to the courses, they've got skills like using iMessages, using feedback, active listening, all those kinds of skills they've now got with each other. They come into therapy and it goes much quicker. We've also found that when people take these types of courses, they are transferable skills. So if parents take a parenting class, they can start using those skills in their marriage, or they can take a marriage class and start using those skills in their parenting. So I forgot to add that into our discussion.
Okay, two more. One is a question, are the slides available to us?
Sure. Yeah.
They will be on.
This link will be
the link will be on the Force website and posted in approximately 3 days. So, and they will always be available to view.
Okay, and the second question was regarding sex. I have the problem with sex that you mentioned, being afraid to connect because it might lead to sex. I find I have an anxiety around sex now.
Yeah. Usually that takes the cooperation of both parties, but I found that, as I was saying in the webinar, that often men just want to know the assurance. They often will feel like their spouse has all the control of the sex and they don't, and so they make bids all the time, right? Go ahead.
I should have said I was female when I read that question.
Oh, female. Okay. But she's anxious about it, if I understood right, the questioner. And so it could be that she associates affection with bids, and then she's always in this decision-maker role, which seems very unfair, that women should be in that kind of decision-maker role. and the role of I'll reject you or I'll end up doing something that I don't want to do. It just seems like an unfair place to be, and that talking about it and coming to some type of sensible way of having sex that's good might be a way to relieve that anxiety.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that that question was brought up and that it was mentioned quite a lot in your talk. That obviously is something that's quite common with couples.
One quick question, is DHR offered anywhere else other than Chilliwack?
We have been offering it through the University of the Fraser Valley in Abbotsford as well, but Chilliwack is our base. We've had a few students that have taken it and have attempted to do it other places. And we've done it in a few Aboriginal communities where they've asked us to come specifically, and they've organized the couples for us, such as Chehalis up near Agassiz and up in Lytton as well.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining, and it's just been noted that the slides are available as of tomorrow morning. So all of this will be on the Forces website to view along with those slides. So thanks everyone. Have a great summer, and check out the Forces website for the upcoming topics.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thanks.